Okay, good morning, everyone. My name is Alexandra Porter, and I'll be introducing the topic of today's webinar. Today, we'll be talking about campus dining and COVID-19 silver linings as it relates to the pre-vaccine and pre-therapy stages across your campuses. Just some quick housekeeping notes. We have muted and turned off video for everyone upon entry. If any questions do come up that you would like addressed during the length of this webinar, please submit them in the Q&A section. We'll address as many questions as we can get to. Any that we don't get to today, we will answer via email immediately after the webinar has completed. So we can just jump right in here. We're really excited to have this great selection of hosts today. We have David Porter, the author, founder, and president of Porter Consulting. We're also happy to have Ben Anderson, who's the CFP and head of industry relations at GrubHub. And we also have Mike Clear, the co-founder of Watchman Payment Systems. And myself, Alexandra Porter, I'll be moderating and guiding you through today's presentation. So some of the intended takeaways that we hope that you receive from this session, we have a list here of COVID-19 residential and retail dining solutions, how to create value to protect your historical meal plan pricing, how to look at food insecurity mitigation solutions, how to grow commuter meal plan participation, and finally, and certainly not least, mobile ordering technology. And we believe this is a mission critical thing to look at. So just a little background here. Over the past 25 years, Porter Consulting has served over 400 colleges and universities, engaging all 50 states and the provinces in Canada. We've also served in the US Virgin Islands. We've had 11 loyal team members along the way, primarily based in Maryland. So now I'm gonna pass it off to David Porter. David.
Hey, thanks, Alex. Actually, this is going to be a really meaty, good, full presentation, and we're really excited to continue to share our COVID strategies and how to create more value for not only residential dining, but commuter dining. Some of the silver linings that we're kind of talking about is we think this could also have presented opportunities with the technology, and what we're dealing with is to help reduce or mitigate, in some cases, eliminate food insecurity on some sectors, on some campuses, as well as growing and strengthening the revenue bases and the financial models for colleges and universities, whether it's residential and or retail dining. And we have a few others along the way. In the book that we wrote and issued a couple of years ago, there is a section in here about meal plans too, and we talk about how meal plans are the backbone, the financial backbone, at least of a residential dining program. And we want to talk about strategies using COVID strategies on how to protect that and enrich that. Kind of an outline of an approach, certainly that we would take and we would recommend that you would take on your campus as planners, or if you're helping and working with individuals on campus, is pretty much those stakeholder meetings, the qualitative stakeholder meetings. And in this environment, a lot of that can be done via Zoom. Understanding what the housing and enrollment assumptions are going to be for the fall. That clearly is something that is still up in the air. There's a lot of, I think, demand, a lot of interest, a lot of students that have made preliminary commitments, but I think a lot of administrators are also waiting over the next days and weeks to determine whether or not any of these students are going to formally commit, or maybe at the last minute decide to postpone their return to school for a semester or a year. We're also going to be looking at the COVID-19 safe dining strategies. That's an important part of a plan. The mobile platform integration, that's, again, Alex mentioned, mission critical, and we couldn't have a better group of experts today to talk about that, Ben and Mike. Revenue and labor food cost projections, along with overhead projections, to look at what the financial implications and consequences are of any of these strategies. Looking at the meal plan strategies, how to structure meal plans, especially during this COVID period of time. And then any adjustments that need to be made to the venue or design or layout implications. And I would guess most of those implications in the short term will be really adapting and utilizing existing facilities, existing stations, modifying them as opposed to a major renovation. Hopefully we're going to get past this COVID crisis in a year or two, hopefully closer to a year. And so whatever we do in the short term will be just that, short-term temporary solutions to get us to the other side of this. One of the examples I wanted to share today was a strategy on how to create value with the dining program. I mean, value is an emotion, and when we have meal plans, it can be anywhere between $4,000 a year. Some of our clients have them as high as $8,000 a year. There's clearly a price value analysis that goes through parents and students' minds, or basically their gut. I mean, value is an emotion. If we pay $2.50 for something and we don't think it's worth it, then we think it's too expensive. So if a student pays $6,000 a year, or parents pay $6,000 a year for a meal plan and they don't think it's worth it, then it's too expensive, and they're going to, one way or the other, demand to reduce the price. So we want to present a COVID strategy here as an example on how to increase or create value. One of these strategies is a 24/7 anytime dining ghost kitchen. And I think we've all heard the term ghost kitchen before, but it's essentially a kitchen it could be as part of a restaurant, it could be in your residential or a retail dining facility. But it basically is when there's no storefront, there's no dining room that's not open, there's no servery, there's no place for a customer to come up, place an order, and either pick up or take away, or those areas are closed. And the orders are electronically delivered to this kitchen. Ben's going to talk about that in a few minutes. And then the individuals in that kitchen can prepare a wide variety of really spectacular menu items, just as they would if a student or a faculty or staff member was going to come in for lunch, dinner, or late night. The only difference here being that then the food could be delivered, either prepared for pickup or delivered on campus to student residences or designated points of delivery where students can get together, or faculty and staff can get together and pick these up after they've been delivered. Another strategy that we've used and we've actually used this before for looking for ways to increase value for upperclassmen, juniors and seniors, when a school wants us to look at ways to justify having a junior or senior be required to buy a full meal plan because they want to have a 4-year live-on requirement, let's say. Of course, the whole goal is to make it worth it. And one of the ways we've done that is we've developed these pantry box strategies where students can actually get a pantry box once a week, pick it up, bring it back to their room, have snacks, even if there's a 24/7 either in-person experience on campus, or as I just described, electronic. You place your order, you pay for it on your platform, and then you have that delivered to your residence, or you come and pick it up. But this is another way to add value too. So if you want to have snacks in the room, some prepackaged items. But with this COVID crisis, even the possibility of including in this pantry box some masks and a little bit of hand sanitizer, so the student, again, gets a little bit of an added value as part of their meal plan. So when the campus wants to continue to charge, and this is actually one of the campuses we're working at right now in Pennsylvania, they actually charge $6,000 a year for a meal plan. The reason we think this is important, and this is going to be something that you're going to have to confront one way or the other on your campus, is as evidenced by what happened this spring, when after spring break and after the conclusion of the spring semester, when most students, or if not all students, went to a teleclass model, there were actually families, 30+ families, that were suing colleges and universities for a partial refund for their tuition because they did not believe an online education was worth as much as an on-campus education, which is what people had originally signed up for and paid for. We want to avoid that confrontation in the fall if, for all the right reasons, the school has to implement COVID strategies that could shrink your program, whether it's the hours, the menu, the levels of service, the number of locations on campus, and so forth. But if the CFO or the business people don't make an adjustment to the meal plan, again, it's very likely that a family's going to say, well, wait a minute, we understand you've got to make these restrictions and curtail the program, but at the same time, we're also suggesting that we're not willing to pay $6,000 a year for the meal plan. So we want to get ahead of this, create more value to eliminate it, also just to create a nicer experience for the students. So some of those residential and retail strategies, and again, that's why we said the mobile technology is mission critical, and Ben's going to talk about that, but the cashless transactions, that's really big because we don't want students, faculty, staff, employees potentially passing an infection back and forth on legal tender, a debit card, or a credit card while finalizing a transaction. The elimination of communal dining. In some cases, some schools are going to completely eliminate it. Other schools are going to go to a much lower socially distanced calculation for capacity, which is usually about a 60 to 70% reduction in dining room capacity. So on one hand, it provides some level of access to that dining room, but on the other hand, you still have 70% of your students, again, depending on the enrollment and the number of students that actually return to campus, that need to be fed. But the ability to pre-order food, use your meal plan as a method of payment, even a residential meal plan, and then have that contactless delivery to your res hall on campus, or have the student come and pick it up. And we just mentioned the contactless delivery. Again, pre-order, meal plan pay, with your residential meal plan, deliver. And we've even looked at strategies where a delivery person would not go to a student's room, but a delivery person would drop the food at a platform or a set of shelving within the secure perimeter of the res hall, right adjacent the information desk. And when the student is notified that the delivery's been made, they can come down and pick it up 24/7. Obviously, there'll be just about everything will be takeout, but Ben's going to talk about this in a few minutes too. I just kind of labeled it no queue takeout. So instead of having, 30 people waiting in line 6 feet apart in order to place an order, then wait for the order, and then pick up the order and leave, Ben's going to talk about how you can use his GrubHub technology to pre-order that from, and there's a really cool map Ben has that I think he's going to show today too, where there are many, many points around campus and surprisingly distant from the location where they're going to pick the food up from, where a student actually places the order and pays for it. And then by the time they get to the location for the food, it's all ready, it's all packaged, it's at a pickup counter. The student can go right past any line, pick it up and walk out. So that not only creates more capacity, more throughput, but it also eliminates that those challenges of social distancing while you're waiting in line. We also think there's a way to potentially expand offerings. We talk about menu reduction, but if we've got a number of retail locations on a campus, and we were consulting with a school up in New Jersey a couple of weeks ago, where they've got a couple of retail locations, they've got a residential dining location. Well, the residential dining essentially is going to go from all you here to eat to a retail a la carte production mode, even if the food, if it's delivered to a residence, is going to still be part of their anytime dining meal plan. I kind of equate that to if we've ever gone on vacation with family members and the kids start ordering food on room service, they don't have to worry about who's paying for it. So that would be a kind of that type of an approach because the meal plan would cover it. But if we've got a ghost kitchen and we can actually close a retail location that's not too far away from that ghost kitchen, but not necessarily eliminate that menu, but morph it into and leverage the production in the ghost kitchen. And on Ben's app, the customer can pull up that separate cafe and have the kind of the trade dress or that look or the brand of that cafe, order their coffee or their sandwich as they would in the cafe, but it's actually being produced in the ghost kitchen. Hence, we're leveraging that labor, we're saving labor, we're making more efficient use of the labor. And then if the food is delivered, so be it. But if the customer just goes to a pickup area in the area, it's still the food that they ordered. And if it's close enough, it's convenient. So there could be some silver linings in terms of actually creating efficiencies, leveraging labor, growing revenues, and at minimum, not creating a financial liability, but potentially even growing your bottom line. Now that's a pretty nice silver lining right there. Of course, we hear a lot about the mobile handoff, the entryway handoff, where again, using this mobile technology, order the food, pay for the food, or the coffee in this case, and then a student or a customer, faculty, staff just goes up here, picks it up, and they're on their way. Food trucks are also a nice way to leverage locations, and also using Ben's technology, because you're going to hear me say that a lot. We're talking about Mike's technology as part of Ben's solution in a minute, but using that as part of a food truck strategy as well. So let's just jump over real quick and talk about some commuter students. And we talked about growing commuter student meal plan sales on college and university campuses. This has been something that's been near and dear to my heart for the past 20, probably 3 or 4 years. And I'll tell you why. We do a lot of work on community college campuses, and we just recently found this information. 67% of community college students are food insecure. 14% of community college students are homeless. We've actually have clients in Milwaukee where I interviewed students, and some of those students lived in a tent under a bridge, and they were attending this community college, and because they know that's about the only way they're going to get from where they're at to another level and be able to get employed and at a level that can work for them, and they can take care of themselves. So there's a huge need and a huge demand for support for not just these students, but for all students. So over the past 30 years, and this is what struck me about 23 years ago, I did some work at a VOTEC in Montana, and it was kind of a welfare to work program, single moms. And it was a 2-year school. And what blew my mind at that point was in the focus groups, they were asking me if they could have meal plans. And I'm thinking, what? It was a definite head scratcher. Why would these individuals be asking for meal plans when it's hard to sell voluntary meal plans to just about any student on any campus, regardless of their socioeconomic background? Now, the next part of that was they wanted to use their Pell Grant money, because they were all very transparent and very forthright by saying, hey, Mr. Porter, we all get Pell Grant money. But at that time, when they had any unused leftover Pell Grant money, they get a check. And they just told me they went out and blew it. They went to the liquor store, they went to the bar, they went to, just spending on stuff they shouldn't have been spending on. They were very frank about that. They said, if we could use some of that Pell Grant money, like let's say in the bookstore, and get a food card that could help us budget our money through the next month or two, that's what we'd like to do. We also had a student in Georgia one time, probably about 20 years ago, that came up to me after a set of focus groups, and he said, Mr. Porter, can we use our food stamps to pay for our meal plan? So this need has been around, well, as long as I have, at least professionally, been doing what we've been doing. But until recently, we haven't had the technology, and that's where Mike Clear comes in. So I'm very excited to let Mike talk to you about exactly how you working with Ben, we can have basically an off-the-shelf plug-in solution to do exactly what these students have been asking for the past, at least asking me for the past 23 to 25 years. With the residential meal plans, we kind of figure out what creates that value. Well, there are lots of things that create the value, but a big part of residential dining is the payment source, right? It says either mom and dad or financial aid or family savings helps pay for tuition, room, board, and fees. So once a student has the meal plan, they don't have to take any money out of their pocket on an ongoing basis throughout the semester. They just use their meal plan. It's kind of, it's not free, but it's free to the student in terms of having to take any legal tender out of their pocket to get their meal taken care of. And kind of inside baseball internally, I kind of refer to that kind of as like funny money, right? It's all serious and it's all expensive, and we're not making light of anybody's abilities or any budget or what it costs for an education. But in that, it doesn't impact an individual as much to take a meal plan and scan a barcode at the door than it would to take $11 or $12 out of my pocket and pay for that meal. So what we're looking at with commuter meal plans is how do we create value? How do we make it worth a commuter student's while to even want to do this? What would incentivize a commuter student to take what little disposable income they have and then transfer that onto a commuter all declining balanced meal plan and spend it on campus? Not much, probably. At least that's been my experience for the past 30 years, 25 years. However, let's talk about that payment source. And that's exactly what Mike Clear is going to talk about, which I'm super excited about here. Now, if we can plug Pell Grants, financial aid, and in some cases, SNAP or food stamp money and other scholarships as a payment source to fund either in small increments or as an ongoing basis throughout the semester, boy, that's the holy grail, isn't it? I mean, we certainly can talk about the value of using scholarship money to pay for books. I've got a colleague that I've been going to NACAS conferences for 30 years, NACOS, NACAS, NACUBO. I've got a colleague that I kid around with once in a while. He's a bookstore consultant. He does for bookstores what we do for dining. And I've often thought to myself, I said, you know, Tom, we should set our booze up next to each other and put a sign over it and say, which one of these amenities or services or support does a student not need to be successful while attending a college? Well, financial aid has no problem funding a $150 textbook. So how about a $10 lunch so a student can have some food in their stomach so they can retain, they can study, and they don't have to worry about where their next meal is going to come from. So the idea of using Pell Grant money or any kind of scholarship that is actually, that qualifies to be used in this manner is as important to a student's success at your institution or any institution as textbooks, even as the curriculum, the classes that they take. Now, in terms of this revenue base we were referring to, I'll do some really quick math here for you. So let's just assume there are 5,000 resident students, 1 cup of coffee a day, $3.50, and that's about what I pay for a coffee at Dunkin' Donuts. I get a little shot of espresso in there too. So if we took 1 cup of coffee a day, and let's just say 4 days a week, so it's a community college, could be a 4-year school, and it could be 5 days a week. But let's say 4 days a week, and let's call it a 16-week semester. So if we take $3.50 times 4 days times 16 weeks times 5,000 students, now we're talking about times two semesters, $2.4 million a year. So if we only put enough money from Pell Grant or from any of these other sources onto a commuter student's card to let them buy 1 cup of coffee 4 days a week, that's what it's worth in terms of a potential revenue base. So that's about $224 per student per semester. And if you wanted to sell it in the form of a meal plan, per meal plan. Again, let's bump it up to lunch. We've done a lot of work on community college campuses. We've probably been on 20 community college campuses in the last 5 years. We were on one last fall here in Maryland, in Montgomery County. The average check for lunch on the Rockville campus was $11.50, I think, cash, a la carte, retail food court. Didn't matter if you were a student, faculty, or staff. You go in, you buy a sandwich, a drink, maybe a piece of fruit, or a little bag of chips, $10.50. So 1 lunch a day, 4 days a week, 16 weeks a semester, times 2 is $6,720,000 a year. So if all we were able to do using Mike's technology combined with Ben's technology is to let a student spend by 1 lunch a day, 4 days a week, and using their financial aid to do it, that's what it's going to generate in terms of strengthening the financial construct of the business model, whether you're a self-op or a contracted food service. Hey, let's just swing for the fences here. Let's say you've got a student that wants to get something for breakfast, a snack for lunch, and then maybe a late afternoon snack or meal before they depart for going home or going to work. That's about $21 a day times 4 days a week times 16 weeks times 2. That's $13 million a year times 5,000 students. Now, of course, these are just, numbers that we're using as an example. Some schools have 40,000 commuter students, and we worked at them, 48,000 commuter students, and some have a couple of hundred. But again, it just gives an example of the opportunity to help students be more successful by them not having to worry about where the next meal is coming from, using financial aid that, again, food is arguably equally as important to a student's ability to study, retain, have a sense of any kind of security, to help them get to school, stay at school, excel academically, and graduate and get into the workforce. And to plug that financial aid money in to do it, again, it's just a no-brainer. So again, I mentioned Mike's name a few times. I've gone through a lot. We've got a lot to go through here. So Mike, take it from here. Tell us about how your system can do a lot of what we've talked about. And I'm sure you've got some stuff to add to that. And then we'll get it over to Ben to wrap it up for us.
Apologize. It looks like I was muted there. Can you hear me okay?
You can.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much for having me today and for letting me participate in your presentation. I'm really excited about what we're working on, independently, just with regard to CARES Act funds and student financial aid and making it more accessible to every student, as well as the project that I'm going to talk about today that we're working on directly with GrubHub and in cooperation with GrubHub to make food more accessible to students in your on and off campus dining environment. Specifically today, we're going to talk about a really simple solution that we have, which would enable schools who don't have a traditional on-campus dining environment, or who maybe do, but it's closed at the moment, to be able to support students in a remote learning environment. So this may not be a full wholesale replacement of your current solution, or it may be your current solution if you don't have one. And this also may be short-lived in the fact that David said earlier that our hope is that this recovery process is less than a year or two. This may not be something that persists beyond remote learning. And again, it may be something that persists. But that all being said, I'll just get a brief overview of who we are and what we do. And I'd just like to start with why Watchman, why consider us? And I'll also just dispel a thing that I think confuses folks out of the gate, and that's probably our fault, but our name is Watchman Payment System. So oftentimes people think we're a credit card processor trying to sell a better rate, or that we're a competitor to, say, a Blackboard or a Seaboard solution, and that we provide a card on campus. While we do offer some services that are similar to those things, that's not what we're talking about today, and that's really not what we're all about. Our core business is to enable financial aid as a tender type with any approved merchant, meaning in some cases we do get involved with the credit card flow, but we're not your credit card processor. And in all cases, we really complement your existing card system if you have one, or we can operate in the vacuum without a card system. Our core business just relies on the fact that each student has a unique ID or ISO on campus, that ideally they have a card that reflects that number, or they know their ID number, and that's the trigger for our process. We enable Title IV, also known as federal financial aid, like Pell, Stafford, and any sort of other grants that may come from the federal government. We also cover I think, widely overlooked and underutilized aspect of financial aid, which is something we call sponsored payers or sponsored accounts. Many bookstores call this third-party financial aid, veterans, vocational rehab. In the state of California, the program is called EOPS. We have concurrent enrollment students, which are just a huge portion of financial aid nationwide, foster youth, NCAA, again, massive nationwide, and then just academic and merit-based scholarships. Many of these fund types are eligible and accessible for purchases on and around campus, and oftentimes are overlooked by administrators because it's just too difficult to transact. So instead, the thought process is if they come and ask us to do this, we'll give them a voucher and we'll let them spend it. But if the student doesn't go out of their way to ask for it, oftentimes they forfeit those funds. So how does our process work? What do we do to handle this? Well, effectively, we sit as a, and I hate to call it this because our engineers have put a ton of time into the software, but we effectively sit as middleware. We sit between your student information system on campus. So there's two major brands in this space. We do support others as well, but our turnkey plug and play solution really fits nicely with Ellucian's Banner and Colleague systems, as well as Oracle's PeopleSoft solution, and the on-campus approved merchant. In the context of the discussion today, we'll think about it in terms of connecting your student information system on campus, where ideally you store information about the students' financial aid balances and their accounts and even their bursar and scholarship charges, to a approved campus merchant. And I say approved campus merchant because we don't decide which merchants can accept these funds. That's up to you, the campus. And in the context of today's conversation, let's just put GrubHub on that side of the bucket. So on the left-hand side, we've got, say, Banner or PeopleSoft. On the right-hand side, we've got GrubHub as a web interface to access this financial aid. Well, in very simple terms, our process is intended to allow the student to go through the checkout process as they normally would inside GrubHub. And if you haven't used that app just on your own, I highly recommend, even if you don't fulfill an order, but just go download it and see how it works. It's really simple. You pick a restaurant, you pick what you'd like to eat, and then you get to a point where you need to pay. And it's at that point in the transaction that once our student is enrolled in this service, they would have another tender option at checkout. And that tender option would do a little check against their student financial aid and see if they have eligible financial aid and whether or not that aid is aid that could cover this transaction type. And we represent that with this slide here, but in a simple way to think about this is when you go to a grocery store or when you check out on GrubHub online, your credit card company is pinged with a request to say, hey, can Mike Clear buy this item and does he have enough credit? And the credit card company either comes back with a yes or a no. And that's what our software does, but in the context of financial aid, right? We're not checking their credit, we're checking their available balances and what they're trying to spend it on with rules that I should mention you have control over. So if you wanted this feature set to work during specific times of the day or night, or you wanted to set some rules around how our process would authorize or decline transactions based on fund source or fund type, all of these things are possible. And in fact, most of our customers already do that today. Once the system kicks back a response to GrubHub, then GrubHub would just move along as if it was paid in any other manner, or maybe split the transaction over financial aid covers the food. And if there was some sort of fee or the student wanted to leave a tip, it would put that remaining balance on an alternate payment type like their Visa or MasterCard. And then the student's gonna get their purchase just as they normally would. In addition to that, there's no file drops or manual process for your administration or your campus. Instead, we'll have already written this charge back to your ERP. So that's the Banner, Colleague, PeopleSoft environment, so that when the student's done with this transaction, the financial aid is spoken for, which would prevent them from a double spend scenario where maybe they spend the money and then you accidentally disperse it. Can't happen because we've already written this against the transaction on their account. And we also reconcile with GrubHub daily to make sure that your campus and GrubHub are in line on the charges that occurred and the payments that were made. So at a high level, our goal here is just to make the financial aid access component or financial assistance across your campus just as simple as the I guess, tender types that we've come to know, like, and trust, like cash, check, credit card. And with that, you know, the other, I guess, aspect that I often hear back from campuses when we talk to them about just introducing this program, whether it's for dining or in the bookstore, is two primary objections. The first objection is, you know, well, my campus won't let me do that. We'd like to do that. That's a big deal. But the more common one is, well, the financial aid gets dispersed to students and it's all gone. So why would we make this accessible if we just write them checks and it's gone? And that's true to an extent. The biggest chunk of funds that we're looking at on this slide is the federal loans and institutional or federal grants. Those top three chunks, we're talking about billions of dollars here. In most cases for four-year colleges, those monies are dispersed up to 10 days before class or sometime after the first 2 weeks of class. But what is often overlooked here is that they don't disperse it all at once. The school is smarter than that. They disperse the money that they can disperse at the time that it's drawn down from the federal government or the funding provider, and then they disperse the remainder over the course of the semester. So with our software, we can allow students to access those funds as they're available. And then we really jump into the three sections that I think matter, which is if we just forget about federal aid, either because your school won't let you touch it, or because you perceive that it's not available, it's been covered, it's taken out for tuition, housing, and other fees. Well, there's still the $13 billion from private and employer funding. Like, let's say you work for HP and they're covering your schooling. There's state grants, there's veterans benefits. These are all billion-dollar buckets that are eligible to cover things like course materials, dining, and transportation that could easily be made available to students at the point of sale if it wasn't a cumbersome, painful process to access them. So I think this puts into context the not so uncommon, yet quite frustrating, frankly, to be honest, from my perspective, objection of, there's just no money left, or it's not there by the time we would like to use it. These are real data points from the College Board that indicate that this is a multi-billion-dollar fund source that unfortunately is just overlooked because our current system is built to sort of marginalize these students, and we can fix that. So what else are we working on? And well, number one is our GrubHub financial aid concept, and I've talked a lot about it, so really I'll just give you a quick overview. The purpose of this program is that we wanted to partner with an entity that is known, so we don't have to create a new app that's going to be the new market solution. Why reinvent the wheel? GrubHub is already doing a great job there. And we approached GrubHub and we came up with this concept in cooperation with Ben and his team for a product that we call Food Secure. And at a high level, it's just a service that allows colleges, both four-year and community colleges, to provide funds to students specifically to address food insecurity concerns. This is kind of born out of the COVID-19 pandemic, but it works both with the current crisis or after it's over. And our goal is to just make the on-campus dining option, if it's not an option right now because of social distancing or just because your provider isn't going to keep it open, you need an alternative. And we wanted to create an alternative that would do that. And really all that we do is we make another tender type visible inside of the GrubHub solution that allows students to access these financial aid types, preventing double spends, allowing for custom rules on behalf of your school. And the real beauty to it is that there's little or no cost to participate for your campus and for the student. And we can get into those details if this is something that you're interested in. The other two big projects that we have going right now is that we're working with NetSuite and the University of California State School to introduce a SNAP benefits program so that they can accept EBT across their campus dining and in some of the food venues of their campus store or their C-store. And the goal there is to really improve the EBT experience. So they already had the capability to accept EBT prior to us getting engaged, but you had to use a different terminal, which meant the student had to come up and declare that they were using EBT, and then they were pointed to a different process that was not their normal Visa, MasterCard swipe. And we don't really see that as a solution, nor did the associated students at this campus. So they mandated that if the school was going to change their system, they needed to make a way where everyone could check out with the same workflow and that you wouldn't be pointed to a different process if you were using these benefits. And then last but not least, we have a integration that's pretty much underway as well, similar to GrubHub's, but it's designed to make our direct billing management for inclusive access programs in the bookstore, which is basically just a way of saying when you register for classes, your books come included with your financial, with your cost for college. And we have a way to make that billing automation a lot lighter on the reconciliation side. We won't get too far into that today, but really what I'd love to also share is at the bottom of this slide, we surveyed recently financial aid advisors and directors, both from the state of California and the state of Florida, to see how they felt about this program. Because I'd have to be honest, when Ben and I first started talking about this, we both had some hesitation as to, is this something that schools would really want to do? And so my thought was, well, why don't we go to some associations that I've already engaged with and ask them? And this quote, and it's not representative of all the feedback we got, but I'd say by and large, our feedback so far has been immensely positive. But this one kind of covers I think, sort of the mind trap that people fall into and the ultimate outcome that we really didn't expect but appreciate, which is at first I felt like students may take advantage or waste financial aid that they need for other things on food delivery. But I thought about it, and they really may need to get it, to get food and stay safe, meaning that, not risk exposure during this crisis. And I think that's the mindset that we should be looking at this from, is that, we have solutions for this outside of the world that we are currently subjected to due to COVID-19. But why not think forward and walk away from this horrible crisis right now better off than where we started, with a way for students to not be marginalized and to learn better and to have full bellies and backpacks full of books the first day of school, or the moment they walk into class. So with that, I really appreciate the opportunity to be a part of this presentation. I guess if there are any questions, I'm happy to address them when we wrap things up. But I'll hand it back over to David, and I guess we'll move on to the next phase here.
Okay, Ben, take it away.
Great. Welcome. Excited to be here as well. A lot of what I want to walk through here is sort of been grounded in these earlier conversations about how are we adapting to the evolving food service. How are we, providing as frictionless of the transaction experience, given the context of what the students is already doing. So if I can actually see if I can get the ability to change the slides, if you guys can send that over to me. But at a high level.
Can you request it?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I forgot that I have to request it. There we go. Perfect. Thank you, David. So at a high level, I want to start with just sort of these broad trends that are happening even sort of prior to COVID when we talk about the retail experience, and then dive more deeply into some of the initiatives we're seeing with some of our colleges throughout COVID, and then kind of end with, like you said, David, how these trends sort of pull it all together, some visualization, how they're occurring in the sort of real world, if you will. So to start off, one of the trends that we've been seeing for a while is this extension of the point of purchase. An example here, I have a few, but basically, layering in from a single point of sale to whether it's, a big airport where there's a lot of tablets sitting around, really about engagement. The Applebee's sort of example on the top right, of where you've now added a digital experience in addition to the in-store. So those, I'd argue, are more about engagement than they are about retail, creating frictionless retail. But really, especially in the last 5 years, we've seen this huge surge in kiosks. And, if you think about kiosks, right, there's really sort of two use cases sort of in store that we tend to see for these, kind of the bottom left, where you're looking to create this sort of different point of purchase in addition to the walk-up experience. So we call it like a kiosk bank, right? Where you walk up and you're deliberately trying to push people to a certain area that's not the normal point of sale. And then kind of the far right in the bottom, and this is another thing that we're seeing a lot more of, where you're actually effectively turning the normal counter space, the regular, sort of as was the counter space, into a walk-up digital experience. So different use cases. But the reason I really point to the bottom right as being a core example is a big challenge, especially in the context of COVID, is where's that labor coming from? And we see the sort of surge in kiosks for the last 5 years. A lot of this was driven by how do we optimize labor, especially for that cashier type functionality. So when you're thinking of kiosks, really, is this a replacement for the traditional point of sale experience? Is it an extension out of that? But in general, the technology is clearly evolving, especially in this fast casual retail space. In-store experience. So on one end, right, the extension of the point of purchase, a lot of different things happening in store around automation. Varieties of examples. The top left is sort of a kind of a funny, cheap one where the Home Depot by my house in Oakland now doesn't have cashiers. There are sort of 6 self-checkout lanes with one staff person sort of facilitating, dealing with frustrated customers that are doing this for the first time. But in general, this idea of moving to sort of a facilitator and then multiple pay stations. Again, a way to sort of reallocate maybe some of that labor, in a variety of retail environments. And then, a couple examples. A lot of this is being driven by visualization technologies. So being able to have items that aren't, cameras that aren't necessarily scanning barcodes, but are being able to see image sizes. Or, for example, some colleges are actually playing around now with identity software for door access or access control. So the technology has a long way to go, and there's obvious security concerns. But so the other element of this is what the technology is doing in store, and then the bottom examples of where the store is effectively completely automated. A fully automated coffee concept in the bottom left, and then sort of a physical in-store experience where, if you're familiar with Amazon Go, they're using a variety of visualization, weight sensors, just a lot of different technology, so you can walk into a kind of C-store concept, grab a piece of gum from the shelf, and when you walk out, it's already knows that you have that based on proximity, and when you walk out, you sort of completely self-checkout. So a lot of that we'll start to see more and more creep its way into, as it becomes less expensive in a day, sort of our normal day-to-day retail. And then the third thing is, as we've extended out the point of purchase and we've changed that from physically in store to, especially through COVID, a lot of restaurants have a huge percentage of their orders coming digitally. How do you actually create that point of pickup? So those are, technology examples, non-technology examples. The one in the middle was the first place that I saw doing these locker systems years ago was the Cincinnati ballpark. And then we're seeing these sort of mutual or kind of shared marketing examples. The far right is an example where there's, a Soul Cycle, this busy athletic concept, and Sweet Green, a common salad concept. And for, pre-order pickup, they just created these pickup areas in the Soul Cycle, so that if you ordered, your lunch before you jumped on the bike, by the time you were finished, it was sitting there alphabetized, waiting for you in the shelf system. So the point of pickup may not be in the traditional store as it was in the past. Kind of like you were saying, David, earlier, of creating in a campus, maybe these sort of hub and spoke model delivery, where you're not delivering to everyone's dorm, but you're delivering to their, the front of their building, or in their building, and having a pickup area as soon as you walk in. And then the huge shift here in extending that point of pickup, or sort of reshaping it, if you will, is delivery. And I think we'll obviously see more and more delivery. Kind of the fast forward of the world that I see is, as the automated car technologies improves, we'll see these sort of logistics systems fleeting themselves around a university to do a variety of different, on-demand, whether it's pick up to a remote location or direct delivery. Especially the advantage with a college is they tend to be, fairly contained. Obviously, there's urban environments, but this type of technology, I think, will really find its way to become very effective in higher ed. So I'm going to buzz through some examples. Just to start off, GrubHub Campus, the group that I work with, I would say is probably different than what most people's perception of what GrubHub is. And it starts with this creating a customized experience within GrubHub. So the fake example on the right, Tahoe State University, if you open up the GrubHub app at the university, you're seeing this specific view of on-premise restaurants. Now, for some of the things that we're working with Mike and Dave, this might not be the interface, but it's important for us to say that when we're talking about the higher ed market, for us, it starts with how we're supporting the on-premise operations, knowing that's really the key piece of the puzzle. Fully integrated with the different pay types, the different declining balance and meal plan systems. A lot of being able to manage real-world dining environments is how you do it on the back end. And how you can allow a menu, or you may have a 20-minute line at one point and a 5-minute line at the other. So how does the technology reflect that? If you run out of something in store, right, in the physical walk-up world, you can just tell people you don't have it anymore. But in the digital mobile world, you have to have ways to automate that into the consumer experience. Otherwise, you're just disrupting the operational flow. And then I'll share this in a minute, but a lot of what we've done is build out that other technology stack platform. So kiosks, light point of sales, and other products that are really designed to reflect that the point of purchase is changing, the point of pickup is changing, when we build our operational processes around pre-order and mobile, even if it's just a greater extent than it was in the past. So some things that we were doing around COVID specifically, heavily our business was supporting, the on-premise retail operations of a higher ed institution. But, obviously doing more of that, but residential dining has been a big one, especially as soon as COVID hit. A lot of our operations shut down some of the retail facilities, but, they still had a bunch of international students, for example, and they had to figure out a way to feed them, but they didn't want them coming into the dining hall. So they kind of, with a flip of a switch, they started offering pre-order pickup from both retail and residential dining, and done in a contactless and safe way. Same idea for delivery, delivering direct to the student using the platform. Same idea again with groceries. Those packaged meal kits, Dave. I always love the visual of that. The pantry box. Great concept, great way to provide a lot of value. And with universities, they're used to buying a lot of this bulk product for their C-store markets, being able to leverage that buying power to create these little grocery packs for the consumer. Example of delivery, so this was Virginia Tech. As soon as COVID hit, they really wanted to figure out how they could do delivery. So using the platform, they basically allowed not delivery to everyone's dorm, but they created these branched pickup locations, at these different locations. So someone could go in and use their meal plan money, pick the venue, pick what they want, and then pick where they want it delivered to. So these, variety of pickup points on campus. And then the far right, obviously validating with pay type, and making sure that transaction works technically as needed. Another example, this is sort of visual of what we were talking about with Mike, but the high level premise, even in theory before we're finalizing the integration to be able to use some of these other fund types, but a common example we ran through for COVID is you have a university that had to send a bunch of kids home, and now some of them have a couple $100 on a flex meal plan, or maybe $1,000 left on sort of a declining balance based meal plan. Well, what do? Do you refund that money? Do you roll it over for the next semester? So, and again, I always caveat, this is not sort of the core part of the business, but it can be a effective and really important part of the solution, whether it's tied with the on-premise piece or not. But being able to go to a dining operator and saying, hey, rather than refunding all that meal plan purchases, or another great example, as we're transitioning potentially from a virtual semester into a physical semester for fall, allowing universities to say, okay, for the first 3 weeks of the year, you can use your flex dollars on GrubHub, anywhere that there's a valid restaurant you could order from. And again, that might not be all the meal plan money, but being able to say, okay, these flex dollars we want to use here, but the dining dollars will only be used on campus when people return. So again, allowing us to leverage this broad marketplace of restaurants with those on-premise pay types. And then just a real quick, I'm not going to go to detail, but just as I mentioned, we really have spent a lot of time over these last 5 years building this full technology platform for all aspects of the dining experience. So on the left, the consumer-facing products, in the third column, kitchen display system that has some really kind of cool high functioning capability, a printer and a tablet. That's sort of our base product used, I'd say, thousands and thousands of our on-premise operations. And then an example in the top right, just to call out, when we talk about reshaping that point of pickup, one of the things we found pretty early on is that, these busy Starbucks locations, for example, you have a bunch of people order your lattes and this, and rather than just having people walk up, and even though we're notifying them in the app when the order is ready, you still run into the situation where people are walking up and saying, hey, I just ordered, hey, is my coffee ready? And that can be operationally disruptive. So we invented this GrubHub TV product that basically you sit right in the pickup area, and and again, has some really kind of cool social distancing use cases. But the idea is, your order is not going to turn green until it's ready. So your order number, 92, 82, whatever it is, and basically you're able to push people away from that congested pickup point through some of these visualizations. And in a college, that might be in the seating area, that might be standing outside of the dining hall, so you can only allow 10 people into the dining hall at any given time. So it's some different ways to leverage that. But the whole idea is, it's not just about the consumer experience when you talk about the technology. It's about being intentional and really thinking through the merchant experience and that point of pickup. So let's look at that in the real world, right? These concepts. Again, extending the point of purchase, automating the in-store experience, and reshaping the point of pickup. So this is what David mentioned. What we're going to look at here is a series of Google Maps that basically show green dots where people were standing when they placed their pre-order, when they placed their mobile order for this Starbucks location. And again, the idea is this kind of helps visualize how this is really about allowing all these different parts of a university now to become the places where people order and pay from, the places that people wait, right? And really pushing out the traffic from these high throughput retail locations. So starting with the greatest zoom out, if you can see here, what's interesting is, because the technology can throttle the wait time, it may take you 25 minutes to get your latte, but the user knows that ahead of time. So they're actually ordering from downtown Rochester before they even, it's 25 minutes. They're ordering it from downtown, and by the time they get that, back to campus, it's waiting for them. And again, the ETA fluctuates in real time. But as we zoom in, right, this really comes to life. I always like to call out the student that's either walking around ice or swimming with their phone above the water to get their coffee. But you can see, how the library, the parking lot, people are traversing campus. So, the classic example is you order as soon as class gets out so that, you can time it so you can pick up your latte before you get to your next class, where, in that 15-minute window, you just wouldn't have had time without the pre-order process. And then here's, I think, the great zoom. And then, another kind of fun example. So this is a different type of location. We're looking at two venues here. And, one is a morning coffee shop, right? So here's the people streaming in the morning. You can see them as they park. They're walking from maybe the bus stop. And then by the time, they get there, it's ready for them. This is the zoom out of that, right? So you can see how the traffic is kind of throughout the urban area here. And now this is a lunch location, right? So much more centered around the campus, but now you can kind of see that part of this come to life where people are ordering from the various parts of this healthcare facility. The in-store experience, so bringing this all together. I like to use Ohio State. They've sort of hit the gas on our technology over the last 4 or 5 years. They have about 40 venues on premise using it. They're using delivery from a lot of those venues. But this is really where we've done a lot of our in-store automation. They also have 10 retail venues on campus where they don't employ cashiers. So some quick examples of that, right? You walk in, you're interfacing with these kiosks. All the back of the house technology is there as well, kind of fully integrated and automated. You can see the pickup points on the right. But what's really cool about this is, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, we built those kiosks in a way to be super flexible. And in fact, in COVID, what we're finding is those kiosks are also designed to be light, kind of mobile-centric point of sales. So in this example and many others, what the operators are going to do as return to school is actually just flip those kiosks to now be operator facing, and now and they can connect via a Bluetooth cash drawer if needed. But the idea is now you have a product, and again, the point is, this is sort of overarchingly, I think, how a lot of stores need to be thinking in the future is how the technology becomes flexible, but being able to sort of pivot this to being in-store or consumer facing. So just wrapping up in the end here, different things that we're working on, whether that's lockers, automating to different robotic technologies, or as Mike and David said, really thinking through how we can provide the gateway to other pay types as well, so that, in the world of COVID, really allowing universities to become flexible, and especially in environments where they may have to, virtually interact with students across the country, how in those cases, in a way that really supports the goals and initiatives of the university itself, leverage things like what Dave and Mike were talking about with federal funds, to be able to provide services to students wherever they may be. So with that, I'd like to thank David and team so much for the time and opportunity, and a pleasure working with you guys. And I imagine if there's time for questions, we can address those.
Hey, Ben and Mike, and certainly Alex as well. Thank you so much. This has been a full hour, I think, of a lot of great information, very appropriate for the times we find ourselves in. And again, silver linings in terms of what can come about as a result of having to go to these types of systems and take advantage of opportunities like Mike had talked about in terms of providing opportunities to reduce or eliminate food insecurity, helping those students to become more successful when they're on campus, and combined with the technology, the leading edge technology that GrubHub has. So anyway, I just wanted to thank everybody for participating today. We did see we had a very nice turnout. If you have any questions, please submit those to any of our emails below. We'll get back to you. And I will also be available via email to ship you a recorded copy of this webinar. We'll send those out to all the people who participated today, all of our participants. So again, thank you, gentlemen, and Alex for a great presentation, and make it a great day, everybody.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.